Was the past 2+ years of work on my game for nothing? That is the question I've been asking myself the past few weeks now that my game is getting close to the end. And I still don't really know the answer to that question. Over these 2 years, I've played and worked on this game so much that it's become bland for me. So I have a hard time judging whether it is actually fun to play, and I've never actually had people play test it. So in today's video, I want to dive into the game and try to answer that question, especially with all the new additions I've been adding to the game. Please stick around to discover with me if my game is worth all the work. I just want to let everyone know that 87% of you are not subscribed to my channel. Because of this, you could be missing out on substantial updates on my game as well as life-changing advice each week. I wouldn't want you guys to miss out on anything I have to offer, so I recommend you go down and subscribe as well as hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. And while you're down there, maybe like the video and leave some feedback in the comments. It would be greatly appreciated. If you didn't know, this game is my first commercial product and was my first ever time using Godot and Asebright. Just with those two factors alone, this game didn't have good odds. I also had never really made an actual game before or a big project of anything. Before this game, I only made tiny projects using the visual scripting website Scratch and Python. I've never designed a set of mechanics or levels, and especially not a whole world. What I'm getting at is that I didn't know how to make a game fun. I didn't know how to make a game that people actually wanted to play. And throughout the past 2 years, I've ignored that issue until this past month, which was a horrible plan, judging that I plan to release the game soon. The point of this video is, do I have a natural talent for making fun and engaging games, or was it all for nothing? Looking back at old footage, I've realized that my enemies were super simplistic, and that is due to my initial vision of the game being only a platformer and the enemies were just obstacles. The player could avoid the enemies and just run past them. And then, as I added more enemies, I allowed scope creep to persuade me into adding a combat system, which has now evolved my game into a full-on action platformer game where I have to balance platforming and combat sections. This drastic change in my game without also changing the old system shows certain parts of my game are still built for just a platformer game. The first enemy, the fox, was built to chase the player and only bite at them. That's it. This isn't a huge deal for the first enemy, but because this is my first project, I cheaply copied and pasted from enemy to enemy and as well as to bosses. The enemies are just one example of where this happened, but my whole game was affected by this. And about halfway into the production of my game, I realized this and made changes to how I designed and coded things, except I never went back to fix my old designs, which brings me to the present day and the main contents of this video. The past two devlogs, I have talked about making changes to different parts of my game, which I did show off boss health bars and interactable grass in the last devlog. Those changes helped with the engagement of the game, but I knew they wouldn't be enough. That's why I also went and added environmental effects, starting with raining in the mound biome. To go along with the rain, I also changed the shader for the mound to a light gray to make it feel more dull. These additions were specifically picked for the mound because they are commonly associated with sadness and depression, which fits with the story of the mound and the inhabitants in it. Another environmental effect I added was snow in the iceberg biome. The snow was added to make the biome seem cold, but it also goes with the theme of spirits and death, which the enemies of this area also follow. To go along with the interactability of the tall grass I added in the past devlog, I added choppable ice to the iceberg, which has almost identical functionality to the tall grass. I'm alright with these two mechanics being so similar because they are in different biomes. These biomes are not right next to each other in the timeline of the game. But on top of that, they both fulfill a common player need of an object the player can just hit and it will react to them. This is important, and I touched on this in a past video where I talked about having funsies in your game, which is something for the player to interact with when they get bored, and it makes the world and the game feel more engaging and like the player actually exists in this world. And my hope is these mechanics will make the game more engaging and more fun for the player. The last environmental system I added so far was dripping water in the dungeon. My hope with this is to build a sense of location in the game world And what I mean by this is that the dungeon is located underneath the lake, and I want the systems of the game to reflect this design decision in the world. I've also done this by having flooded sections of the dungeon to further build the proximity to the lake. This next thing I have talked about a lot in the past couple devlogs, and I hope to be done with it this devlog, but I have changed the lighting in the dungeon once again. I went back and changed the shape of the light texture to be more of a spotlight, and the intended effect is to have more exaggerated dark areas of the dungeon because the light from one fixture doesn't travel as far and it doesn't point up. I also achieved this by making the shader to be even a little more darker, and I removed some light fixtures to make the gaps between each fixture a little bit bigger. And finally, my last attempt of this video at making the game more fun. This change goes back to the example I talked about earlier with my enemies and bosses being very simplistic. And because of that, I have started adding new attacks to certain bosses, and I plan to maybe change some enemies as well. The boss I'm showcasing in this video is the Frost Lich boss in the Iceberg biome. For this boss, I realized even though it is a lich and they are commonly associated with spirits and the dead, the boss didn't have any attacks that show that association. Because of this, I have added a number of attacks that summon evil spirits in different patterns that players will have to prioritize along with the actual boss. And hopefully these different attacks will build a stronger world and will make the boss fight a little more fun. So, do these additions to my game answer the question, was the 2+ years of work on my game worth it? And my final conclusion is, maybe. So, obviously, that conclusion is a little harsh judgment because I have learned a lot in the process of making this game. But I still think this game needs a little more to make the answer a yes. And I still plan on releasing the game in the coming months, but I have a lot of work to do. So I plan on continuing to add new and engaging interactables and systems, but there is no new content that is going to be added. So the focus is entirely fixing what is already in the game, making the game just more engaging and fun through interactables and those fixes that I am referring to. And this is all to fix the mistakes of my younger self of making a super simplistic game, and now this game isn't supposed to be super simplistic, and that is why these changes need to be made. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as leave feedback down below. If you want to see some of the additions I talked about in this video, you can find that video in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn the key to success, you can find that video in the top left-hand corner. And thank you again. This is RBC Mr. Rhodes signing off for now.